Yeah, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Very welcome to our today IEA webinar in July. We have three STEAM experts and colleagues which are here to talk about Iranian economic history during the Pahlavi period, Reza Shah and Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. So these three speakers, I would basically start with a short introduction of them, and each of them would talk about around 20 minutes, and then we have around 30 minutes at the end of the webinar for question and answer and discussion. Please feel free to post your questions or comments in Q&A box in this Zoom portal. So let me introduce our panelists today. We start with Dr. Mari Yoshinari. Mari Yoshinari, I learned about her research and works when I visited last time Tehran in summer 2022. She's quite active in the field of history of Iranian economy, as I said. Currently is independent researcher based in Tehran. She was a former postdoctoral of Social Science and Humanity Research Council of Canada, and recent publication includes labor history and economy in Iran, workers, entrepreneurs, and the state, which is co-edited with Serhan Afacan, who is also another panelist here with us today. She has also a co-author paper together with Dr. Ali Saeidi, who is, we have also the pleasure of having him here in this panel. The paper is about governing by partnership, the role of Abdul Hossein Nikpur and the Chambers of Commerce in Iran's national economy. Her forthcoming book would be published soon. It is about Iran's modern economic history, 1921 to 1946. Dr. Yoshinari will talk about Iran's quest for economic autonomy, foreign trade, banking, companies, and industry in 1921 to 1946. Our second speaker would be Serhan Afacan, who has joined us from Turkey. Serhan is an associate professor at the Institute of Middle East and Islamic Countries at the Marmara University in Istanbul. His research mainly focuses on modern Iranian history, the history of Iranian workers and state-society relationship during the Pahlavi period. In his PhD dissertation, for example, he examines the working and the living conditions of textile workers from 1906 to 1941 by using their petitions as the primary source of material for data for research. And last but not least, we have also the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Ali Saeidi, who is joining us from Tehran. Dr. Saeidi is an associate professor of economic sociology and social policy at the Faculty of Social Science, University of Tehran. He did his PhD in University of London in 1999. From 1999 to 2001, he was a research associate at the Center of Middle East Institute, University of London. Dr. Saeidi basically has done many research on Iranian oral economic history. His research focuses on Iran's economic oral history, the said family businesses, and the contemporary economic history of Iran. He has published 5 biographies on leading businessmen and technocrats of Pahlavi period. Serhan will talk about the Craftsmen reaction to industrialization policies under Reza Shah, and Dr. Saeidi will talk about private sector in the Pahlavi era. So we start with Dr. Yoshinari, Mari Yoshinari, who will begin with her presentation on Iran's quest for economic autonomy. And then we continue with Serhan and finally with Dr. Saeidi. And at the end, we would have a round of question and answer. As I said, the floor is yours, Mari.
Hello? Yes? Hello?
We hear you.
Yes. Oh, great. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Camille. And thank you so much, Dr. Farzanegan. Okay, so today my topic is Iran's quest for economic autonomy and its foreign trade, banking, companies, and industry from 1921 to 1946. So first of all, I just wanted to show you here in the PowerPoint that we have different types, different perspectives on economic history of Iran. And we can find these perspectives in more specific literature or also in more general histories of modern Iran and also in histories of the Middle East. So this has an important bearing on the opinions of that period and even on how that period fits in with the longer history in the 20th century of Iran. And I am just going to show you a few arguments I have here that just sort of give you an idea that when I am thinking about the periodization starting at 1921, this is and ending in 1946, this is different from what we often see 1925 to 1941, thinking more about the time of Reza Shah's rule. I just wanted to show that, in fact, I have a different perspective on this period. And then if we can call it state-centric periodization, so that we start from 1921 and we go to 1946, because there were actually developments going on with regards to Iran's economy. And it's important, I think, not to ignore those and overlook those. And as I give this presentation, hopefully it will become more clear to all of you, what my points are, what I'm trying to say here. And just to begin, of course, starting with 1921, in my opinion, we're starting.
Mary, we can't see your slides. Are you sharing your slides?
Oh, yes, I am. Yes. I'm sorry. What?
No.
Should I go backwards?
No, please just share your slides. I think you didn't connect. I think she
lost.
By mistake dropped out.
Yes.
She'll be back. Mohammad, do you want to go with some...
maybe?
Oh, no, she's back.
She's back. Mm-hmm. Dr. Yoshinari, can you hear me?
I think internet is not that good in Tehran nowadays, right?
Yes, she is based in Tehran. Dr. Yoshinari, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi. Do you want me to? Can you see the PowerPoint, or I'm because
not
I
yet.
don't see the share option here. So
Maybe
yes.
she's not in the panel. So it should be this box to share your screen.
Okay, just a minute. Let me open this up here. Okay, here we go. There we go. Is this well, there's one that says PowerPoints. Okay, I guess it's this one. Is that right? Can you see it now?
Not yet.
You have to share it from within Zoom. So if you go to Zoom and click the green share button.
Are you there, Dr. Yoshinari? Shall we?
Oh, yes. Can you see the PowerPoint now?
No, unfortunately, we cannot see that.
Here, let me try it again. Can you see it now?
No.
Are you doing it from the
No?
Zoom app? So if you go,
Yes, I did share screen. I did share screen, and
But you
then
want to-
I did it from Zoom.
so if you might want to unshare it if it says share, unshare it.
Oh, do you want me to stop share? Okay. There, I've stopped it.
Okay.
You want me to try it again?
Yeah, from
Or-
Zoom. If you go from Zoom, click the green button, share.
Share screen, right? Okay. And I have, okay. I was going to click on July 10th presentation. Is that right? Or there's another
Perfect.
one and it says, is that right? Or PowerPoint slideshow? There's two of them actually.
Probably PowerPoint slideshow.
Okay, I'll try that. Is that working?
No, it's not.
I don't see.
Maybe
really?
maybe if you could log in and log out, and then we can move on with
Yeah.
the next speaker, and then we can try again.
And
Is
then
that
we
all right?
come back again to Mari. Okay.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to email it to you first and then maybe you can
Yeah, if you
upload
email
it?
Mohammad, that would be great.
Okay,
So, Serhan,
Yes.
we continue with you, and then we come back again to Mari. All right?
That's perfect idea, considering the problems that she is having with the internet, I think. So I share my presentation, hopefully.
Please.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
I think I got no more than 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, maximum, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this excellent invitation to IIEA and also to Professor Farzanegan. And I'm very grateful for having the chance to talk about part of my PhD dissertation. Actually, it's not directly linked to my PhD dissertation, but it's among subjects that I have been studying for since I think like 15 or 16 years. But in my PhD dissertation, which I defended in 2015 at Leiden-University, I worked on Iranian workers, especially textile workers, during the same period that I'm going to talk about. So during the 1920s and 1930s. In that dissertation, I mainly try to understand how the workers were affected by large-scale industrialization policies of Reza Shah, which mainly started in mid-1920s and continued all the way until the end of his reign in 1941. But then I realized during my research that there were also those people who made a living from craft industries, the artisans or the craftsmen, we can call them, and who were deeply affected also by industrial policies of the same period. So today I'm going to, I will try to share some of my ideas on craftsmen's reactions to industrialization policies under Reza Shah during the 1920s and 1930s. Let me share with you some preliminary goals of my discussion. I am not an economic historian, so I am not going to go into the economic aspect or the technical details of economic history of the period. Plus, I do not intend to give an exhaustive account of the subject because it's very detailed and very complex story. I will try to touch on some of the main issues and some of the main, I think, discussions which were going on in that period among the artisans, among the craftsmen, and the central government in Tehran. So I think everybody can hear me, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. There are many crafts and a variety of sources which need to be examined for a fuller understanding of this significant subject. But I will not go into all of these sources, definitely not, and I will almost exclusively rely on craftsmen's petitions as my primary source material. So this study and the chapter which I wrote for our joint edited volume with Yoshinari was exclusively based on the petitions sent by craftsmen to the central and local authorities during the 1920s and 1930s. Also, craftsmen's experiences had a long background which extended far beyond the Pahlavi era. So there is a story, and this story is very long, which mainly started in the mid-19th century, but even that, it has a very long and long historical background. And I am not going to go into that. I will just share some aspect of this very long story by focusing on the 1920s and 1930s. Why the Reza Shah period is so important or special for understanding the experience of craftsmen? It's because during this period, there was an unprecedented degree of large-scale industrialization, which affected virtually everybody, including craftsmen. So they could not escape the consequences of these industrialization policies, and they had their own concerns, and they also had their own methods of negotiating with the local and central authorities to gather the working of the industrial policies. Prior to this period, prior to the large-scale industrialization period, the inflow of foreign commodities constituted the main challenge for craftsmen as reflected in their interactions with local authorities. So before the Reza Shah period, basically the craftsmen were concerned about the foreign imports into Iran, which they thought basically killed their business and deprived them of their livelihood. As far as inflow of foreign commodities was concerned, the foreigner had become a mutual enemy for craftsmen and the Bazaris alike. To this, the traitorous native merchants, who in the words of the petitioner from Azerbaijan in early 1920s, import into our glorious country the kinds of articles which are domestically produced on a scale great enough to meet people's demands, and by whose production craftsmen are saved from misery were added. So there was a mutual enemy, the foreigner and also the traitorous, so-called the traitorous native merchants, who killed the business of craftsmen and who very much hurt the home manufacturing in Iran. But this time, when we come to the reign of Reza Shah, the challenge came not from foreign imports, but from nationalist, sorry for the misspelling, from the nationalist governments, which equally cared about curtailing imports, obtaining full tariff autonomy, I'm sorry for the entire misspellings, and developing home manufacturing, albeit with a different perspective to economic growth. So I will try to share some of my ideas on how these craftsmen were affected by the industrial policies of Reza Shah and how they negotiated with the central and local authorities to work the system to their minimum disadvantage. But since I said that I will rely on their petitions as my primary source material, let me tell you a little bit about what I exactly mean by these petitions. Petitions can be defined as, quote, demands for a favor or for the redressing of an injustice directed to some established authority. And this is not my definition, and you can see the source here. So petition has a very, very long history in Iran, as elsewhere in the world, like the Ottoman Empire in Europe, etc., etc. Petitioning was one of the oldest practices in almost every civilization and tradition. But when we come to the 20th century, petitioning was established as a constitutional right by the Article 32 of Iran's 1906 Constitution, which basically read as follows: an individual may submit in writing to the petition department of the archives of the Assembly a statement of his own case or of any criticism or complaints, end of quote. So the petition was established as a constitutional right, and Iranians from almost every segment of the Iranian society used this right to the full, and they sent hundreds of thousands of petitions to the Majlis, which are not available in the Majlis archive today in Tehran, in Bahrain. So they sent petitions to the central as well as local authorities in which they expressed their demands and grievances. And also in some petitions, in order to further consolidate their case, they sometimes attach to their petitions a letter of testimony or an istishhadnameh. As you can see here, for example. Here you see an individual, a certain man who was seriously hurt and harmed in the factory and even lost one of his arms. So he was demanding help from and support, financial support from the government. And to prove his case, he sent a photo by him to prove that he was no longer able to work and provide for his family. So you have different types of istishhadnameh or letter of testimonies. And this is what the petitioners do in order to consolidate their cases. Okay, and in most of the cases, you have the individual petitions, but sometimes you also have collective petitions, such as the one you see now on the screen. You have petitions like, for example, signed by thousands of individuals and sometimes even more. So these petitions are very, very valuable if we want to understand, especially the social history of modern Iran, especially the Pahlavi era. And I very much used these petitions, and I'm still using these petitions to examine the social history of labor in Iran, especially during the Reza Shah period. And I mostly start from the Constitutional Revolution, and I go all the way until the end of the Reza Shah period. So far about my topic and also about my sources. But what's my main argument? My main argument is artisans during this period feared losing their livelihood due to increasingly centralized and specifically factory-based industrialization policies under Reza Shah. Besides, every argument and discursive tool that craftsmen and their supporters had employed against the flowing imports since the mid-19th century could now also be applied to support large-scale industrial establishments during the 1920s and 1930s. These arguments mainly included reducing reliance on foreign goods, halting the outflow of precious metals from Iran, safeguarding the nation's honor, and contributing to the welfare of the Iranians. Thus, the discursive weapons of those who advocated for self-sufficiency, for curtailing foreign imports, and protecting craft industries in a way turned against them. Okay, and here are the main points of my presentation. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, economic policies did not overtly favor the adoption of the factory system, not because it was not favorable, but because it was regarded as impossible, because there was no enough infrastructure, and also there was no enough political determination to adopt factory system. So the craft industries were still favorable and very popular to achieve self-sufficiency as far as Iran's home manufacturing was concerned. Instead, during this period, especially during the 19th century, much of the 19th century, emphasis was placed on promoting domestic industries through any feasible means. In this milieu, rural and urban artisans were not yet significantly apprehensive of government policies or the central state's regulatory influence, particularly concerning the industrial domain. So the artisans were still popular. They were not living the best of their time, but still the government, as far as economic and then industrial policies were concerned, was not acting against the craft industries in Iran, like we did, for example, during the Reza Shah period. However, this division between the two opposing narratives was eventually eradicated under Reza Shah's rule. And Reza Shah, the official industrialization strategy during this period, during the Reza Shah period, quote, was based on the view that more factories are better than less factories, that state factories are better than private factories, that big plants are better than small plants, and that capital-intensive production is preferable to labor-intensive production. And of course, which means by the start of the Pahlavi period, which means the mid-1920s, the official industrialization policy and openly favored factories against the craft industries. Again, during this period, import substitution was effectively employed as a policy to expedite Iran's industrialization. By then, of Reza Shah's reign, numerous factories had been established, producing a range of commodities, including sugar, matches, soap, oil, later with textile goods claiming a significant portion of this expansion. Plus, several legislative measures were implemented to promote the use of domestically produced goods at these factories, such as, for example, the law for the use of national clothes of February 1923, which mandated that all state employees, including the military, wear clothing made from native fabrics and of Iranian origin. So this is, I think, very important. Between 1925 and 1941, the end of Reza Shah's reign, 211 laws were passed, and 934 decrees, were issued concerning industrialization and related matters. What is important at this point is that most of these laws and decrees favored large-scale industrial establishments, which means they favor factories instead of craft industries. And we have several examples of this, such as, for example, in 1925, a law was enacted to grant a 10-year exemption from import duties for industrial and agricultural machines, as well as their component parts. Also, for example, uniform dress law of December 1928 served the economic interests of large-scale industrial establishments. Also, the government's inclination towards factories was also evident in the Factory Act, which is also the first ever labor law of Iran of 1936, which introduced several significant measures to regulate working conditions for workers employed in factories, not in craft industries, with 10 or more workers, and which ironically placed greater liability on the employees rather than the employers. As a whole, while craft industries persisted throughout this era and beyond, so I mean, these craft industries have not suddenly faded away under Reza Shah, but they were perceived during this period as outdated, unappealing, and insufficient to satisfy domestic demands or compete with imports. Okay. So, if the state policies, industrial policies ran against interests of craftsmen, what did they do? And what did they basically say and want? Our understanding of artisan ideology, their political inclinations, and labor organizations in both urban and rural contexts in Iran remains limited. We need to put this first. I mean, there are still not enough studies on, for example, craftsmen. Labor history is more or less a relatively more developed area in modern Iranian historiography, but the same does not necessarily apply to the history of craftsmen and their experiences in Iran. So, craftsmen's reactions during this period, which I am examining, revolved around three key issues. First, they complained about factories. They did not like factories because they thought if these factories did not exist, people would be obliged to meet their demands from craft industries. They complained about government policies. They increasingly saw the government and its policies as hostile to their interests. And also they complained about the changing consumer behaviors. They complained about Iranian people who started to show more interest in modern clothing like European clothing, European style clothing, instead of like, for example, wearing kalbas or other traditional Iranian clothes. So these are the three key issues around which the reactions of craftsmen revolve. So what did they do to work the system to their best interest? Definitely, they have done a lot of things, but as I said, I will try to focus on their petitions, and I see these petitions as a way of negotiating with the central government, and also as a way of collective or individual protest. So I see petitioning as a labor action, if you want to call that way. For example, you see a petition here sent to the Majlis in October 1931, which requested the encouragement of the use of Iranian fabrics. And these Iranian fabrics, which they understood, definitely were produced not by the modern factories, but by the traditional Iranian craftsmen. I think I have only 1 minute left. Can I use 2 or 3 more minutes?
2 minutes, please summarize. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Then I will speed up a bit further. And you have a translation of this. As a humble servant, I am neither a shroud seller or a condensed seller, Karbas, and I am presenting this petition solely to assist the unemployed and impoverished. How long must we persist in clothing our deceased in foreign fabrics? So why are we like buying the foreign fabrics as shroud for our deceased? Instead of sacred prayers, for example, one finds on these clothes Jewish or foreign words on the shroud. Like, for example, for instance, number 17 from Manchester. While we are alive, we do not wear homemade clothes, libas lakan, and use foreign shoes. At the very least, let our deceased be buried in Iranian fabrics. And you have a lot of similar petitions. And for example, Senator 1, a petition by cigarette sellers, where they protested the news regarding the erection of a factory, a cigarette rolling factory, in which, as you can see, the translation here, they basically said, look, I mean, they say that they are going to erect a factory, cigarette producing factory, which means that this is going to kill our business. And we are going to be impoverished, and we are going to be unable to provide for our family. And they basically said, please do not do that. Okay, I mean, let our craft survive, and please do not allow for the erection of a factory. Okay. And this is a very interesting petition, which I examined in different occasions. A very long one by a certain Mohammad Ali Yazdi from, I think if I'm not wrong, from Yes. And he criticizes almost everything: the government economic policies, the consumer behaviors of Iranians, etc., and also, like, for example, the Uniform Dress Law of 1929. And I have a translation of it here, but I am not going to go into that. Once published, you can see all of this in my forthcoming chapter. Okay. And there is also, I will wrap up shortly, and there is also the case of the Vatan factory in Isfahan. And this Vatan factory is one of the early factories, a very famous textile factories in Iran, which was established in the first place in 1921 and was eventually owned by a certain Haj Muhammad Hussein Kazaruni, a prominent merchant from Isfahan. I'm not going to go into the details of this discussion, but it's very interesting and important because Isfahan was a traditional textile production center of Iran, okay? And once this factory was erected in the 1920s, the craftsmen basically feared that they were losing their livelihood, okay? And some of them really did lose their livelihood, by the way. And they started to complain about this factory. Why? Because the state, the central government, and also the Isfahan municipality openly favored this factory and placed orders to this factory in order to support their business, okay? And you have a number of different petitions which complain about this factory. But these petitions, they arrive to at no specific point, okay? I mean, in most of these petitions, they basically failed, okay? The state continued to favor large-scale industrial policy, and also modern factories. So although the craftsmen, in one way or the other, they continue to survive, but the state policy did not definitely favor them. Okay, conclusion. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
There was a striking discrepancy between the craftsman success in continuous influx of foreign imports into Iran in the early 20th century, and their failure to do the same in response to modern factories during 1920s and 1930s. The religious nationalist discourse they employed against foreign goods couldn't be effectively applied to the country's own factories. The anti-import campaign was a byproduct, this is very important, of a broad alliance of craftsmen, merchants, the ulama, and intellectuals who saw the promotion of domestic manufacturers as a condition for Iran's independence and progress. However, the overarching aspiration of this alliance was to propel Iran towards self-sustaining growth and eliminate the dependency on foreign products by any means possible. Advocating for crafting industries and their social context found support among many politicians, ulama, and intellectuals when the possibility of large-scale industrialization was minimal. Nonetheless, craft industries became less favorable once benefits of the factory system became achievable. Therefore, large-scale industrialization could very well serve the underlying purpose of this alliance. However, one last note, a critical approach to the craftsman petitions is necessary. For although these petitions are invaluable for comprehending their world and their responses to changes, they can sometimes be misleading if we take them at their face value. Finally, I propose that these petitions are studied. If these petitions are studied to analyze the experience of the Iranian craftsmen who were engaged in other industries and lived in different parts of Iran, our knowledge and understanding of the significant transformations which took place throughout 1920s and 1930s can be equally enriched. Thank you very much, Dr. Farzanegan, for your patience.
Thank you very much, Serhan, for this interesting presentation. I guess Dr. Yoshinari has still technical problems with her internet connection, so we can proceed with Dr. Saeidi, who is talking about private sector in the Pahlavi period. Dr. Saeidi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. I'm so grateful to the International Iranian Economic Association, and also Dr. Farzanegan and Dr. Mohammad. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My discussion is about the state of large private sector in Pahlavi period of Iran. In this short opportunity, I will try to provide a general picture of the emergence and expansion of this sector. This assessment is based on several case studies of large private sector group in last 3 decades. In addition, my research approach is socio-economic. The first major effort toward industrialization and formation of the industrial and modern private sector in Persia began in 1930 when near to 180 modern factories were established, more than 100 of them with almost 25,000 workers were in private hands in Tehran, Isfahan, Tabriz, and Qazvin. The labor movement in 1944 also showed the emergence of the working class along with this sector. In 1960, the report of the Ministry of Industries on 16 large factories with over 1,000 workers showed that the 14 of 16 factories were private. From the second half of 1950s, the number of private sector factories increased, and in 1960s, with establishment of the Chamber of Industrial and Mines, it became clear that a new industrial class has emerged. Because after that, 6 years after establishment of the Chamber of Industrial Commerce, it integrated with the Chamber of Commerce, and then the industrialist dominated in the chamber. We can say that the peak of the growth of the private sector in Iran, which is also called by researchers the golden period of the economy, was in 1960s. This talk actually aimed to study the main reason for the growth of this class of entrepreneurs. The assumption is that the growth of this stratum within dominant class was primarily due to several factors. Actually, these factors have been important factor in growth or failure of the private sector. The first factor which I try to explain is security. Security was the first effective factor in growth of entrepreneurs. It is obvious that security is the most important factor for sustainable development. It may seem that it is not necessary to mention this most important factor, but in Iran, with period of instability and political crisis, I think should be considered as an effective factor in private sector investment. Except in 1940s, in other period, relatively, security was suitable for investment, especially from mid-1950s to 1979. It was a period of the stability and security. Security and respect for private sector, which was provided by the former regime, that more than anything else encouraged the entrepreneur to invest. But it's not the only factor. For instance, several investors, such as Sayyid Mahmoud Lajwardi, the founder of the Behshar Industrial Group, essentially left Iran for United States during the premiership of Dr. Mossadegh because lack of security and respect for private property. There are others entrepreneurs that they left Iran in that period because it was obviously the period of the insecurity. Sometimes there was a political instability, but the government formulated anti-investment economic policy to prevent any labor unrest. For instance, in 1960s, gradually the regime eroded security provided by proclaiming new principle of the White Revolution, most importantly, the obligatory sale of 49% of equity in industrial enterprises. Or when in 1970, the government injected oil revenue into development program and caused inflation, it launched the campaign to fight inflation. Another factor is to succeed or unsucceed of some of them, failure of some of them, is career background. The career background of the most modern entrepreneur was traditional market of Iran. The familiarity with the local and national market, as well as their familiarity with business, especially traditional finance, was an important factor in their success. However, differences between them and their old counterpart was that they moved away from business tradition and innovated in the industry. It is actually a distinction between the entrepreneur, definition of entrepreneur, and the trader. By the end of the Pahlavi period, the modern leading businessman had developed from the small group of factory owners and international trader of 1920s into a significant social economic group comprising hundreds of great industrialists, bankers, financiers, importers, and exporter, contractor, and consulting engineer. Most previous researchers claim that the new industrial bourgeoisie came mainly from the old merchant class, often continuing earlier commercial activity. For instance, as I mentioned, Behzad Industrial Group, one of Iran's main conglomerates that had its origin in commerce and trade of late 19th century, then expanded this activity over 4 generations under ownership and management of the Lajewardi family. However, the role of engineer shouldn't be ignored. Engineers who knew the industry and were able to operate a factory machinery greatly helped artisans with traditional market background. For example, like German engineer Schunemann in helping the Kazaruni factory, and Atolmolk Dahesh in helping many textile factories in Isfahan. However, many engineers devoted themselves to the establishment of the factory, such as Khalil Arjmand in establishing of the Arj Industrial Group in 1937, Engineer Rahnama in establishing of the Polar Industrial Group in Isfahan, and Behbahani's brother, and many others. The other factors which we, I think, consider is important is educational background. Higher educational entrepreneurs' children usually play an important role in developing of the companies, because most of the companies are family businesses. But in Iran, it was the rare to find an entrepreneur who himself and his children or children have studied more than a bachelor degree. Well, most entrepreneurial families did not allow their children to study more than a bachelor degree. Only a few more people got a doctorate, like Dr. Sadat Tehrani or Dr. Tahiri. Their family wanted them to learn business while they're working. Some of them went to the boarding school that taught in English, such as Isfahan Saint Memorial College, before going to the university. In a way, this school taught students about the networking and human interaction in a hidden educational program. But 2 centers was important to mention. Of course, when the companies grow, their needs to professional manager increase. As a result, 2 manager training centers were established in Iran. The first was Industrial Management Organization that provided technical and professional assistance to industries. The second one was Iran Center for Management Study, ICMS, which was an independent non-profit making educational institution that was established in 1970 to provide training of outstanding quality at graduate school level for future managerial and leadership position in Iran, and for students from other countries by teaching most of them in earlier years the Harvard Business School professor. The concept and curriculum of the ICMS has been modeled after the Harvard Business School, and its academic standards have been set accordingly. The faculty is composed entirely of full-time professional teachers of management. The other factors is one of the important other factors is access to credit resources. The Persian bourgeoisie, if we call it bourgeoisie loosely, experienced a sustainable period of the growth beginning in late 1950s, when the government extended low-interest loan totaling near to $100 million to a small number of the mercantile and industrial leaders. Later in 1960 and 1970, dramatic increase in oil revenue, oil income led to further accumulation of capital in private sector in at least 2 ways. First, the state provided credit to business magnates at favorable rate. And second, inflation and increase in real income created windfall profit from the land speculation and real estate development. Another factor is worldview. By worldview, I mean the trips and visit of the importer of merchants and importers of goods to foreign countries, especially factories. A trip and visit of these people from foreign factories was one of the important factors that made them think of producing the same goods inside. This was while government did not provide financial and regulatory support to full-scale industries. In other words, worldview was the reason for growth of private sector in the industry. It happened actually before the as I mentioned, in 1950, not 1960, that some state economic policy helped entrepreneurs to bring the factory inside. For instance, Behshar Industrial Group, as a part of their trade with Japan, they imported velvet. By the time it arrived in Iran, however, the fabric's race pattern had fallen flat, leading to customer complaint and demand for compensation from local merchants. To solve this problem, one of the founders of this group, Akbar Lajavardian, visited the velvet viewing plant in Japan, located near to Osaka. During the tour, it crossed his mind that the Kashan had been the center of the velvet production at one time, and he began to think about setting up a plant there. Having seen that velvet making was not a complicated task, he wrote a letter while in Osaka to his brother Sayyid Mahmud Lajwardi and Hassan Tafazuli, proposing a manufactured velvet in Kashan and to avoid losses rising the velvet imports. They immediately agreed with his proposal. Thus, they acquired 10 velvet viewing machine for a plant establishment with $200,000 of capital. They also signed contract with two technical experts in July 1955. The machinery and technician arrived in Kashan. The velvet plant was set up with help of Mr. Tafazuli, the best carpet maker in Kashan. After 2.5 to 3 years, the first batch of the velvet was produced, marking the renaissance of Kashan's velvet industry. Following the velvet industry establishment, family added related product. By 1956, we can say that the mid of the 1950s, the private sector company were the first agent to sell foreign products. They had open offices outside the Iran, which enhanced their access to international market. The other factors that help new industry, modern industry, is creation of the modern distribution and sales network by the companies. I think this was what's the important factor. What's the important factors for expanding increasing the production and changing consumer behavior and stabilizing prices across the country. Modern countries knew that they had to distance themselves from the distribution network of the traditional market, because that network was in hand of the Bonakdaran and importers. And it hindered the expansion of the product sale and determination of the stability rates for goods. as a result, most of the industrial companies, modern industrial companies, created their own sale network. For example, Minu Industrial Company had created its capillary network in such a way that it could distribute its product to more than 20,000 retailers across the country. There's another factor which I have not enough time to mention that, such as business ethics, but just for conclusion, I mean, just few words that also it is challenging to determine which factor was the most influential. The vision of the growth and development held by entrepreneurs facilitated capital accumulation and investment growth among them. This vision, driven by the belief that Iran should achieve a leading economic position among the top 5 economic power globally, encouraged the entrepreneur to pursue their activity without limitation. Some of them believe, some of entrepreneurs, which I interviewed them, believe that while the desire to make a profit always has been an important rule in development of capitalist society, that is not the only way, or that's not only, or even the most important factor during the development. Based on some narration, pride in building a state-of-the-art industrial and commercial enterprise and concurrently developing the country also play a very important role in what they did. But at the end, in July 1979, just 6 months after the revolution, the property and asset of the 51 owners of large industry were confiscated and nationalized with approval of the industrial protection law. A month before that, private banks were also nationalized. In the following months and years, more industry were confiscated and their owners were deprived of their property. As a result, the large private sector in Iran was destroyed. The structure of the Iranian economy, including new private sector, if there is such a sector in the economy, after that is important issue, but it is behind my scope in this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saeidi. That was fantastic. Very good overview of private sector under the Pahlavi and after revolution, briefly. So we try once more with Dr. Yoshinari. So I have your presentation. Thank you for emailing. I would share it, and then we basically can start with your talk for about maybe 15 minutes. So we have a few minutes also time for question and answer eventually. So I encourage also the participants, if there's any question, comments, use the Q&A, and we hope to have some 15 minutes or something like that for question and comments. So I'm trying to share your presentation, Dr. Yoshinari. So here, see that, I hope, huh? I try to make it full screen. Is it okay? Do you see?
Yes, I can see. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So
Mohammad, is in presentation mode. Maybe just come out of it.
So this is the not presentation mode.
No, it is, but I can also, yeah, keep it like that, perhaps.
Okay. All right. So we continue. Sorry. Okay. We don't have your voice.
Okay, everything's okay? You can hear me?
Yes, now is good.
Okay, good. Okay, so I shall start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So sorry for all the technical problems. I'm here in Tehran, and sometimes, things can go like that. So just to recap, I am today presenting about the period 1921 to 1946. The economic developments in Iran of that period. And then we we are starting with this periodization. We can move to the next slide. I think it's. Yes. So just to give a brief overview where I have grounded my research in the secondary sources. I've looked at the work of some economic historians, also from the modern history more generally, and also from the Middle Eastern history, modern Middle Eastern history. So all these works contain various perspectives on Iran's economy. But I would say in general that the period under study has been kind of minimized if we compare it to the post-war period. And that's, of course, not to diminish at all Dr. Saeidi's excellent presentation. And also, yes, so then we can go on to the next slide. And you can see, yes. So the dynastic periodization is usually what we see for this period. So it starts from 1925 and goes to 1941 with Reza Shah's reign. And my idea is different because I think it's important to see what happened in those 4 years before 1925 and those 5 years after 1941, which was mainly during the Second World War. And we can move to the next slide. Next slide. Thank you. And this is my idea. I mean, it's just a term. I have a working term. The state-centric periodization, which is starting with 1921. Because that was in fact the year that Iran signed the friendship treaty with the Soviet Union. And that really kickstarted the economic developments because it did give a basis actually for Iran being recognized by the Soviet Union, encouraging also other countries in the world to recognize an independent Iran, an independent and sovereign Iran. And it also empowered the Majlis to a great extent to reject the proposed 1919 Anglo-Persian agreement, which was offered by Lord Curzon to make Iran more or less a protectorate. So they chose a different path. And we can see here for foreign trade, nevertheless, that for, pretty much the 1920s, Great Britain remained the #1 partner, but we also see how important the foreign trade with the Soviet Union was, and increasingly the foreign trade with Germany became important. And of course, there were also other countries, such as those in Eastern Europe. They were also sort of what we call third countries, and they were important as well in the foreign trade. And of course, during that period, Iran, was just starting out. The economy was just starting to develop. And so in that sense, the foreign trade was even more important. But there were, of course, apart from going to the trade fairs in Nizhny Novgorod and in Baku, which could be very profitable, and a lot of the Iranian merchants did their trade through those trade fairs. But they were also frequently disadvantaged by some arbitrary rules and not being able to take hard currency back to Iran and so on. So, and there was also a threat posed by Soviet mixed companies, which, basically in a sort of, we could say an underhanded way, the Soviets wanted to really not just northern Iran, but they wanted to increase their hegemony with having trade all throughout Iran and be dominant. We can move to the next slide. And my important, yes. So my emphasis is on the economic actors, and we will talk about that next time. But for now, I just wanted to also draw attention to what started to happen in Iran. And these wheels were actually set in motion before 1925, because There were, various steps until the National Bank was formed, and when it was formed, we see that it wasn't just the National Bank; it was also the Agricultural Bank, or Bank of Agriculture and Industry, and we also had the Pahlavi Bank. In particular, we see the National Bank increasing their branches throughout the country. And that really came to the fore in the 1930s. And we also should say that the banks, the National Bank and the Bank of Agriculture and Industry, they were integral really to the economic development in Iran, the development of industry with the foreign trade monopoly and companies. They were all really interconnected with one another. We can go to the next slide. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So we see here that there's also simultaneously there's a decline in foreign banks, and especially the Russian bank, the Soviet bank that was in Iran. Most of the branches closed, and even the Imperial Bank also its influence was curtailed by the expansion of the Bank Milli, the National Bank of Iran, and to a lesser extent, we see also with the Ottoman Bank. And it's interesting that I found this information in Soviet documents, because they have done a lot of reporting of such details, and it's very illuminating to see really what was happening in Iran's financial sector during that time as part of the campaign to become more autonomous, not to be dominated by the foreign banks, and that's one of the main purposes of the Banca Milli. And we can go to the next slide. Yes, and as I said, foreign documents, I mean, Iranian and foreign, are important, I think. So a lot of my research has been based on the Iranian documents, including the periodicals, as well as the Soviet documents and the British sources, to get multiple perspectives. We can go to the next slide. And I mean, that was very detailed information, but it was just in reference to, if we compare some of the secondary sources with what I found in primary sources, it's very interesting to note, for example, what Ansari says about the Imperial Bank, saying that basically it was so powerful until 1951, but I don't agree with that. I see that, as I said, it was starting to happen in the 1930s, and the British themselves in their reports admitted as much, that they were losing control in Iran. The Imperial Bank was losing control. And similarly, we also have a different perspective from Abbas Amanat about this period. Quite a lot of criticism of some of the officials, of the modernization that was done, but and sort of a dichotomy of this modernization, which some scholars have said is like a pseudo-modernization versus the traditions, the bazaar, and so on. But I think this isn't really a very deep analysis, and it's not a very accurate one either, because one of the most powerful bazaris was Abdul Hossein Nikor. He was the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was there with these other state officials making decisions about economic development, sitting on the boards of different corporations. So I think, we have to take a second look at, this is the importance of looking at a wide scope of economic actors, not just, Reza Shah, in my opinion. And we can go to the next one. Next slide. Yes, and I also just wanted to make a note about women. I mean, they're very hard to find, seemingly, in economic history or in history in general, but especially economic history, and especially this period. And it's just worth noting, I mean, I did come across here and there some information about women, especially in the Chamber of Commerce Journal in particular. And we see at least, there are some Iranian women entrepreneurs. No doubt there were more, but these ones, they had a higher profile because they were participating in this exhibition. in 1936. We can go to the next one. Next slide. And it's also worth mentioning because, you know, my presentation today is also related to the chapter I have in the book. And we also have other contributors, as Dr. Saeidi, as mentioned, and also Dr. Afacan, who's also contributed a very excellent presentation and chapter. And also, we had also in the previous slide, we saw Mr. Gaisarian, who was also one of the main founders of a big, yes, he was a founder of the Qom Respot factory, and in the 30s, especially going to the late 30s, and as we can say, one of the sort of typical Iranian entrepreneurs of this period. We can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. And just another view. So you've seen, sorry, can we just quickly go back to the, can we go back to the two slides back? Yes, thank you. Just right there for a moment. Thank you. So I just wanted to say, everyone says maybe that, oh, wow, everything happens in Tehran. But of course, we know that that's not the case. And even during this period, we had, of course, the Vatan factory in Isfahan. And we also had in Qom, we had this Respot factory. And also, you can see, as you can see, also a place like Khorasan was also part of this movement of capital between the government, the banks, and these corporations, which were joint stock corporations, which really proliferated during the 1930s. They were also a part of this economic development, and with merchant capital, very important. We can move to the next one. And that's just to show the graph that the overall growth of registered companies in Tehran and provinces, the growth of the number of companies, and the growth of the investment. It really took off in the 1930s, even coming to the early 1940s. And of course, I mean, it's very important. Then we have to go back to the 1920s to 1925 to the law of commerce, which really also set this process into motion. And like all the sectors of Iran's economy, the lawmaking was also a very important part of it. And but of course, because of the war and because of the impending Allied occupation, there was, of course, this was, we can say in many ways, curtailed, although not completely, as you'll see at the end. And we can go to the next one. The next slide. And again, you see, you can actually see the figures here for the different types of companies. So although the joint stock companies were dominant, there were also other types of companies that you would probably find more in the private sector, which were also increasing quite rapidly, and with also their own, you know, significant amounts of capital. And we can go to the next one. The next slide, please. And what's, I think, although some may say, well, you're talking about something that didn't come to fruition at the time, but I think it's important, nevertheless, to take note that where this was all going, because, you know, again, many may say, well, it was very much a state-driven economic development, but that's not totally true, because there was also encouragement of the private sector, and it was to an extent, it was successful. And we do see even the government moving towards that, you know, in 1941, and actually they had started with these plans some years before to create a stock market. So they were heading definitely in that direction. But of course, as I said, the war happening, it changed plans quite a bit. And it's significant as well that they planned this in the vicinity of the Tehran Bazaar. And yeah, and then, although I'm sorry I didn't have the time to really elaborate a lot on the 1940s, of course, the Allied occupation and inflation at that time, wartime inflation, and there was a lot of disorganization in the country, and other problems, you know, food shortages and so forth in some places. But surprisingly, When we go through the 1940s and come to 1946, we see that there's still quite a few factories in Iran, and a good number of them are actually quite productive. Some more than others, of course, some of the bigger ones probably more than others. But it's sort of, I think it dispels the myth that everything fell apart in the 1940s, because I think that wasn't the case. And in some instances, of course, during the occupation, probably some of the production was geared towards the war. And then finally, some conclusions that I have is thus that Iran's economy faced a lot of domestic and international challenges during these 3 decades. And we have to consider the scarcity of foreign loans and currency, and Iran's unequal foreign trade position, and its nascent industrialization as a lot of reasons for the monopolization of domestic resources, for rapid economic development, for foreign trade and industrialization. And by centralizing this capital and resources, multiple projects were planned and implemented, not just factories and foreign trade, but also and banks, but also the railway, of course, and but also roads, ports, mines were also being established at that time. And by integrating all these sectors into a centralized system with the support of the new national banks, Iran was able to displace the Soviet Union's commercial organizations and strengthen its financial position relative to Great Britain. So I think those are quite important milestones in Iran's economic history. And this diversification of economic relations with third countries such as Germany and Czechoslovakia. This was also a way of curtailing Soviet and British influence and dominance. It was a way to balance these economic relations. And finally, as I said at the beginning, you know, there were lots of officials involved, not just Reza Shah. There were many officials involved: Mustafa al-Mamalik, Taymurtash, Davar, Kavam, Faruqi, also the Majlis, and even Iranian society, we can say, to an extent, and then also the chambers of commerce, and also foreign experts such as Millspaugh. But of course, there were also many others. There were Germans, for example, Dr. Lindblad and the National Bank and so on. So I hope that I've given you sort of, at least, although it's a bit hasty, I've given you some scope of what has gone on in this period, important developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshinari. That was very interesting and informative to have this information from your side, from Tehran. Apologize for delay again at the beginning. We had some technical issues, so we have around 10 to 15 minutes time for questions and answers. I will look at the question answer box to see if there is a specific question to the panelists. Miss Mernaz Temurian is asking. Okay, that is a comment. That was not a question in that sense. So, Kamirjan, if we have any specific question or comments that anybody want to raise on the panelists, we can also bring you to the panel and to ask your question using your audio. So there is one hand up, Mr. Michael Uri. Ms. Michael Uri, do you want to talk and mention your question verbally?
Yes, thank you for all the presentations. This is my first time attending this this discussion, so very much appreciate the hospitality and the information. Just for clarity, could you provide some context as to how I should be processing the information that I heard? Again, I was not able to join on time because of some issues, either on my end or on the other side. But I did hear the lady talk about the presentation that she gave. I'm a little bit lost as to, first of all, why are we looking so far back? Because I can look at the Western economies and other places and have opinions about it. How should I reconcile this in the context of the Iran that we see today and the Iran that we hope to see in the future?
Right.
Thank you.
Dr. Saeidi or any other colleagues, do you want to address this comment?
Was that a question for me? Because you mentioned
Yes,
me
go ahead.
specifically, and he asked why going so far back. Is that okay? So, well, I mean, first of all, yes, I can understand that question. But I think that we're looking at this, you know, on the one hand, from a historiographical perspective, we're trying to understand the development of the economy. And I think we have to not just look at, you know, the 10 years before the revolution, or, you know, you know, more than 40 years after. I mean, I think we have to go back to the roots, because we're trying to get deeper understanding. And it's not just about the economy, as I said, it has also implications for the broader history, you know, the modern history of Iran and the history of the modern Middle East. When Iran is being described, you know, I've seen some good descriptions, but also some distortions that's just reducing it basically to, you know, Reza Shah was there and it was a strong man, you know, authoritarian system, which really doesn't give a very full account of the developments of that period. So as for the development, as for what's going on today, well, I mean, maybe you'd be surprised about, you know, drawing connections. I mean, if we're talking about factories and the nature of industry, I mean, if you listen, as I do, to TV, state television, they're always talking about being independent, being self-sufficient, increasing the industrial capacity. There's a really strong focus on factories and heavy industry. And at the same time, the National Bank and so forth. At the same time, the importance of trade in Iran today is as important as ever. So as far as I'm concerned, at least the metaphors, the rhetoric is really not that much different from now compared to the 1920s. It's my opinion, but I'm here observing the situation, and that's what I see.
Ms. Teimourian asked about the access to presentation. Yes, we would provide it on the IIEA website later on, besides the recorded version of this session today. Is there any other comments and questions to the panelists that anybody would like to ask within the remaining 5 to 6 minutes?
May I say something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Relating to the I mean, the question of what's the benefit of the analysis of the private sector in Iran related to the new situation? I think it is better to. I mentioned actually at the end that this sector was destroyed after revolution. It is clear. But I think we can learn many lessons from the analysis of the how to emerge this sector. As I mentioned, one of the important factor was the security, even in 2 decades. So security is important for emerging of the new private sector, if you would like to have it. Otherwise, I think this lack of security. And also, if we related the situation of the private sector with current situation, I think it is important to say that most of the entrepreneurs which see the destiny of the private sector companies raise a question that how we with this experience, how we invest in Iran. I think one of the problem of the investment of the private sector in Iran is the history of the private sector, and it showed a way that if in this country they invest, I think you have to face this sort of problem. So that is, I think, is because the entrepreneur look at the history of the experience of the others.
Thank you, Dr. Saeidi.
Thank you.
Serhan, do you want also to comment on this?
Not really, I mean, because these kind of questions just come up when we try to understand the historical background of anything, because I think people are very much, too much concerned sometimes with the actual events. And so I think history still matters. I mean, if we understand Iran, if we understand Iranian society, like Iran's economic developments, state-society relations, etc., history still matters. And we are not talking here about very much distant history. This is very relevant part of the modern Iranian history. And any topic, I think, like, for example, private sector, like economic development, etc., I think they still are very much relevant, and they matter a lot to understand the Iran as it is today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look at question and answer. There are no open questions here. Is there anybody want to add to these comments and questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we are going to close this session. So it is almost 18:30. So it's around 90 minutes that we are here. That was very interesting. Question. There is one Adam. I see Adam here. Would you like to ask your question, Mr. Adam? And Manucher Tekin. Yes, Manucher. Dr. Tekin, would you like to use your audio and ask directly your question?
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, sure.
Well, I just wanted, before you close, to thank you as the organizer, and of course the IIEA, Kamran, and others that I am a member myself, that really this was a very useful session that you organized. As to what is the role of history, I learned a lot from all the speakers of what was the situation of the private sector, the banks, and so on. So I'd like to thank all the speakers and yourself. In spite of saying that what is the use of the relevance of the history, I think it definitely was relevant. So once more, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Dr. Tekin, for your nice comments. We are, as I said, we are going to provide the recorded version of this online YouTube channel of IIEA, and the presentation would be also online. Dr. Saeidi, did you have a PowerPoint? That was your notes that you were feeding, so I didn't ask you.
No, actually, I didn't provide the PowerPoint.
Okay, so I just
necessary,
wanted to make sure that we didn't miss that. All right.
Yeah,
So if you have these notes that you just presented in this very nice format, if you send it per email to us, we would make it also available on IIEA website for our readers here, right?
Okay.
So, I saw Adam also come.
No, it was my mistake. I was too keen. I pressed the wrong button. Just to say thank you very much, everyone, and Mohammad for organizing, and all three speakers. I certainly learned a lot. And just to say, today is the last day for the deadline for submission of papers to our conference in Doha at the end of November. So please, more details on our website, iraneconomics.org. And we should also perhaps remind people that there is no webinar planned for August, because people are supposed to rest in August, but we will return in September at the usual spot.
Inshallah. So thank you again, everybody, and Khuda Hafiz.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Khuda Hafiz.